What's up, Starcraft fans? Today we're doing the tier list for Wheel of Stupid and Cradle of Death. Brian, let's hear the mutation.
Cradle of Death is the map where constructs guard specific points that we have to destroy. These constructs are invincible unless we bring a truck nearby to make them vulnerable. Then we destroy them and both players need to deploy the trucks in the guarded spots to destroy the objectives. Random mutators cycle in for over 4 minutes, and then cycle out for a new one. There are 3 active at a time, and a mutator switches every 90 seconds.
So we have Edwin Home and Joni in the call with us today. How are you guys?
Doing well.
Nice.
Yeah,
So,
good, thanks, mate.
so Joni, how do we rank the commanders this week?
So, this is a tricky one because obviously there is a smorgasbord of mutators that can be thrown at you. The way that I've looked at this is basically, does the commander have any like intrinsic advantages on this map? You know, that's obviously going to help. Do they have any sort of very basic like comp dependencies at all? You know, the obvious ones will suffer there. And then really it's a case this week of like, how versatile is the commander? How generally mutator resistant are they? And sort of the way that I've looked at that is very much a case of with several commanders, are there any mutators that if you roll them kind of just break the commander basically? And if the answer to that question is no, they'll likely be ranked a little bit higher.
That makes sense. What do you think, Edwin Home?
Yeah, I'd agree. It's there are some commanders like obviously Cradle of Death. You have a lot of waves that come into your base pretty regularly, so you have from all the way up to 3 different sides. So being able to defend those well while pushing is generally helpful, and then how well you are able to handle a variety of different mutator combinations. So
All right, that seems fine. Let's begin. Abathur, where do you have him?
Abathur is doing pretty well this week. He has a couple mutators that can give him a little bit of trouble, but it's nothing crazy. It's just the usual suspects of like mainly polarity, really.
Yeah.
Relying on your ally mutator is always difficult for basically anyone on this list, obviously. But outside of polarity, I think he'll be able to handle most things pretty well. Double-edged, he's not too worried about. Diffusion, he's not too worried about generally. One of the nice things is obviously you can just throw waves of locusts into the bases to clear them over time here, so that'll kind of get rid of a lot of mutators here. From there, you just have to worry about like environmental mutators like Blizzard or going nuclear, things like that. That'll make it a little harder to keep your units alive, since obviously swarm hosts are pretty slow. But I think he'll do pretty happily this week, so I had him in A tier.
A tier. What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, like very similar views to be honest. He's use of sort of combination of ultimates and swarm hosts make him pretty mutator resistant. Like playing P2 deep tunnel means that you've got that additional mobility with the swarm hosts that the environmental mutators are going to have less of an impact because you're super mobile. Free units always a nice thing. Toxic nests, similar, etc. And I think the reality is that particularly on this map with Abathur, like his answer to the vast majority of mutators is basically the same thing. It's just what you're rolling is going to impact potentially like how you play with that thing. So yeah, I think he's pretty good. I had him in A tier as well.
What does he have to be wary of for this week, aside from polarity?
So I think he generally actually deals with most things pretty well. Like once you've got that critical mass of swarm hosts built up, like propagators aren't too much of an issue. If you've got your ultimate evolutions up early, then dealing with stuff like missile command at home is not too much of a drama at all either. Like I genuinely think he has got pretty good answers to most things this week.
That's true. That being said, I would be wary of alien incubation and void reanimators in the early game, especially when you do plan to get a fast brutalisk, because when you destroy a unit, there may be more units that spawn out of it than you are prepared for. And of course, the reanimator will make things just painful when you try to lure early, and the reanimator arrives before your first Brutalisk is ready, that might be a little bit annoying to deal with. So just be wary of those things. But anyway, Abathur 8 here. Prestige-wise, second prestige? Or no prestige?
Yep.
I think second helps you against environmental mutators, which
All right.
for whatever reason, I seem to encounter more than anything else on this sort of mutator.
That's fair. Let's move on. Alarak, where do we have him?
So, Alarak is an interesting one in the sense that he's not dissimilar to Abathur in the sense that, like, the typical sort of composition that you'll use for Alarak to deal with like most mutators is the same. Basically, you're likely to be playing P3, probably with some version of like Wrathwalkers, Ascendants, etc., sort of thrown in there. Generally, like he's able to deal with stuff dependent on your playstyle. Having said that, there are a significant number more mutators here that can cause Alarak what is ultimately like a really game-breaking problem. So he does not deal well with stuff like Black Death, slim pickings, microtransactions, like double-edged stops him firmly in his tracks. So from my point of view, Alarak's a much more like stop-start commander in this instance. And I think that the same thing that means he will likely play a similar unit comp all the time also means that he sort of lacks versatility in dealing with certain things in a number of ways. So although similar to Abathur in a lot of ways here, I think that sort of glass cannon really can hurt on this Mutation. So I had Alarak in C tier. Because I think there are going to be certain roles that you are literally just going to have to sit out at home, basically.
What do you think, Edwin Home?
Yeah, it's tricky as Alarak this week because there are several. He is very similar to Abathur in that he has a generally good pushing army, but his army is a lot weaker to things like Black Death and Double Edged because there is no such thing as biomass for Protoss. So without that, it makes it a lot more difficult for him this week. So I also had him in C tier because obviously there's like 3 or 4 mutators I think you're going to have a really rough time with, but generally he'll do okay as long as you can avoid those. And if you push pretty quickly, which with Mama you can do, you'll generally have a time buffer on this map. So if you worst case had to just completely sit at home for 4.5 minutes, you technically probably can.
All right. Did you say C tier?
Yes.
All right. Both of you did have him in C tier. Let's put Alarak in C tier. Prestige-wise, third one?
I think so, yeah.
That gives us the most flexibility, I think. So let's move on. Arcturus, where do we have him?
Arcturus is going to have a pretty good time this week because he has Earth Splitters you can just build in the main base to clear basically everything you need to clear without having to worry about environmental mutators or really any mutators. Obviously, double-edged is your big problem there potentially. But you, again, can just wait that out, absolute worst case, while just pushing with your regular army at that point, depending on the rest of the mutators that you're dealing with. I'd probably go P3 here, so you do have bombers you can push with if you need to. Suicide bombers, obviously pretty nice. Environmental mutators, if you do have to push, can be annoying, obviously, with an Arcturus army because he has a lot of little units, but generally you should be able to mostly rely on Earth Splitter ordinances to clear basically everything. So
just work from home.
Yeah, work from home this week. I think his biggest problems, again, polarity. You can't kill units with that. And then, like, if you get the air defense base on the final base, then Earth Splitters aren't going to be able to carry you there. And then you might run into some difficulty with environmental mutator combos or things like that. But so with that, I had him in A tier.
A tier. What do you think, Joni?
Yes, I totally agree. Basically, I think my view on this is basically use bunkers and ESOs until you have to move out, and then push with P3. P1, to be fair, is also very good on this map. Contaminated Strike works very, very well, particularly on the bases. Having said that, I think probably better off with P3 because the reality is you are going to have to move out at some point. And Arcturus's pushing is probably weaker than his general use of ESOs. So actually, you don't really need to buff that with P1. So I think P3 is probably a more versatile choice. yeah, in general terms, he's pretty mutator resistant. You can work from home by and large. I had him in A tier as well.
All right, both of you had him in A tier, third prestige, right?
Yeah.
All right, Artanis, where do we have him?
Right. So Artanis is sort of, I suppose, the first of the slightly interesting commanders on this. Space Archons and Solar Bombardment are both really good on this map. They do enable you to clear bases and sort of deal with the objectives pretty robustly and quite quickly. And they are also both relatively mutator proof as well. So if you are playing P3, you're likely going to have a decent utility belt, regardless of kind of, obviously with some exceptions, regardless of what you're rolling. Tempests are also very good for this map, just popping off stuff from a range. Having said that, they're very slow generally to move, and so in those terms, environmental mutators are going to cause you more issues. Having said all the good stuff about Artanis, there is also a raft of stuff that he deals with very badly. And I think that the reality to it is, although utilizing those tools sounds great, actually there is a lot more to simply this map than he's able to deal with very easily. So I think Artanis is going to encounter a pretty rough time in general terms on this. So I've got him, regardless of the toolkit that he does have, I've actually got him in D tier.
D tier because he does have theoretically the stuff to deal with it, but realistically, it can get really really interesting.
I was struggling to think of a combination of any three mutators where
Why
Artanis
three?
doesn't.
Just one rather slim pickings.
Well, even one or two, but I think in general terms, it's quite hard to come up with mutators, particularly in combination, that Artanis is very resistant to. So I think in general terms, against more or less anything, and we'll see this with a couple of other commanders later as well, Artanis is one of those commanders that he is generally just a weaker commander and is less mutator resistant.
All right. What do you think, Edmund?
Yeah, with most commanders, you're trying to come up with what combo of mutators is going to give them a big problem, and then with Artanis, you're trying to come up with what combo he's going to be able to do anything with, which is not a good place to be. It's just Black Death, really bad, double-edged, not great usually, and it's just any combo. Once you add any three of these in, it's really going to suck. Microtransactions, slim pickings, speed freak, propagators, or something like that. There's lots of things that are just going to be an absolute pain in the butt for Artanis. I actually had him in E tier.
E tier. What do you think about E tier, Joni?
I mean, I'm not averse to it, although I had very, very few commanders in S or F tier this week, only because there is the capability here just to get a lucky roll and you're fine. I think there are. I'm going to say a couple of commanders who have an even worse time than Artanis, and I do think that Space Archons and Solar Bombardment give him quite a significant advantage when it comes to pushing than with some. So I do think he's got in those two capabilities specifically a specifically more mutator friendly, more mutator resistant toolkit than some of the commanders that I do have in E tier. So I'm inclined to sort of push for D. But I can also he's not great.
Yeah. What do you think, Edwin Home, about D tier?
I was waffling between the two, so I'm fine with D tier on him.
All right. Artanis and D tier. Also, let's not sell Shield Overcharge short. Shield Overcharge is also pretty good in keeping stuff alive. It'll keep
That's
you
true.
alive through stuff like actually I think it'll keep you alive through double-edged. I might be tripping, but I think it does keep you alive through double-edged. It just makes you able to just brawl for longer. Anyway, Dehaka, where do we have him?
Dehaka is pretty good this week. He doesn't struggle against a ton here. Obviously, Missile Command in the early game in particular is going to be painful, but as long as you get it after pack leaders come out, you should be able to kind of just steamroll most anything on this map. Obviously, Polarity, obligatory Polarity mentioned, but things like Void Rifts, he generally does well-ish against Void Reanimators. You can obviously just chuck Creeper Hosts, Creepers over into the bases you're trying to clear pretty safely, regardless of Mutator. So I think he's doing quite well this week. I didn't quite have him in S tier because Missile Command, but I did have him in A tier.
What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, very similar views. I think the reality is Dehaka plays this map under these circumstances very, very similarly to Abathur. You're basically using creeper hosts and sort of chucking stuff from afar. I think that P3 Dehaka is particularly versatile. I think if you take the approach of I'm going to sit at home and try and deal with stuff from a range, because if you do get unlucky and you roll something like Void Wrist and they're just like spawning all over the place, if you get something like that early, they can spawn in really heavily defended areas that you simply have no chance of dealing with at all. So you potentially end up having to defend at home, like potentially all 3 ramps at the same time. So the ability to deploy multiple pack leaders in multiple places is very useful, that P3 enables. At the same time, like P2 for just super fast, very effective pushing. P2 is an extremely robust tool. I think he's got lots of tools to deal with, significantly less so. You are significantly less prone to the whims of fate on this. So yeah, P2 or P3, I had him, again, like borderline S tier, but I had him in A.
All right. It took you about 5 minutes to get to the A tier, but we did get there eventually. All right, A tier for Dehaka. Unanimous A tier. Prestige-wise, third one or second one? You said third one? You like a third one more?
Personally, I think either or. I think they're both very good for different reasons on this. I think P3 maybe gives you a little bit more versatility.
All right, I guess 2 or 3. Let's move on. Fenix, where do we have him?
Well, if you think I took a long time discussing Dehaka, I've written a mini essay about Fenix. No, Fenix has problems this week, and it's very similar to Alarak. He's a classic example of a commander who, despite being very powerful under a majority of conditions, has basically one answer to all problems. Now, I will caveat that by saying I am not a Fenix expert by any chance. By any stretch of the imagination, and therefore I may have simply missed something. But I think he's pretty one-dimensional in his play style, which I don't think is good for this mutator. The ability to throw a small blob of army around with P2 is quite useful. Environmentals, economic mutators, he's pretty resistant against, which is great. But you're then going to encounter, similarly severe problems with the likes of double-edged diffusion, etc., that he sort of really doesn't have very many good answers to be honest. So you probably do want to play P2, possibly P1, just to give you like a bit more of a pause under certain circumstances. But yeah, I think Fenix is going to really struggle this week. Actually, I had him in D tier.
D tier. What do you think, Edwin Home?
Yeah, this week is troublesome, or can be. Things like double-edged, not the best for Caldalis. Poor Caldalis. Usually useful, but double-edged, diffusion, stuff like that will kind of hurt. Black Death can be a pain. Obviously, as long as you keep your shell farm safe, it shouldn't be too bad. The economic mutators, he is mostly resistant to, but like more so microtransactions, I'd say. Slim pickings, it's still kind of tough because you do still need to make a shell farm. Obviously, they're cheaper, but getting that slowed down does slow down your ramp, so that's a bit of a pain as well. Not as bad as some commanders, but definitely still hurts. Things like Void Rifts, yikes. So Yeah, I had him in D tier as well.
D tier. Yeah, no prestige recommendation for D tier. Unanimous D tier. So no prestige recommendation because D tier is considered bad. Let's move on. Han and Horner. Where do we have them?
Han and Horner is another pair that is struggling somewhat this week. Their main saving grace is bombing platforms are pretty solid for clearing out the areas safely. Um, Not a lot of mutators are going to mess with that. Obviously, there's the double-edged effect of, twice the cooldown for the bombing platforms, but beyond that, they'll be okay there. The problem then is clearing the rest of the stuff out of there. A lot of environmental mutators are a pain for them. Economic mutators are a giant annoyance for them. Like I said, double-edged pain, Black Death, big pain. Void Rifts, not too bad once you get the bombing platforms out, but if you get them right off the bat, then ouch. We Move Unseen can be a bit of a pain because of the Ravens, but they're okay detection, not as bad as some others. And you can still use bombing platforms on invisible units.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Beyond that, transmutation might be a bit tough as well. So there's a lot of problems there. So I had them in D tier.
D tier also. What do you think, Joni?
Yes. Yeah, they do not have.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Yeah.
That's about says it all, does it? Yeah, I mean, look, like ET said, the thing with it is strike fighters are great, but P3 makes them significantly less mutator resistant to like everything else, basically. So actually, I don't think appreciating they are low enough that prestige is not going to be an issue, but they kind of don't have a saving grace in that respect. So yes, strike fighters are good. Yes, they're going to simply not get up quickly enough if you get like significant economic mutators early on. Their army struggles against a plethora of different mutators, and I think Han and Horner are one of those commanders where the prestige choice effectively forces you into a specific playstyle. So you're having to pick your playstyle prior to knowing what mutators you have, and they are not very easily able to switch that sort of mid game. So I think they do have some saving graces. Their top bar cooldowns are pretty good. You are not having to, like deploy units onto the map with them all of the time. So particularly calling the fleet, etc., they're pretty decent. But a raft of other problems which their strengths do not compensate for. I had them D to E tier. I think they are bad, if I'm being really honest.
Okay.
I can certainly see them being a tier lower than Artanis.
Both of you said D tier. Let's put Han and Horner in D tier. No prestige because D tier. Oh, sorry. D tier is considered bad. Let's move on. To someone who is not D tier, Karax. Where do we have him?
Yes, one end to the other. So Karax is the only commander that I had as like an absolutely rock solid S tier this week. He is great at this map. You basically use P3. You can get the job done pretty much entirely with your space laser, and then just build static at home. Which, because you've got really good safe zones, static defense as well. So buildings are typically more mutator resistant. Also, you can basically entirely work from home. Send out the occasional observer on the map. Yes, you're going to have to send your truck out, but at the same time, the reality to it is if you've already done sort of the work, you're only going to need to micro that truck, as well as potentially observer TV vision. He's got all the tools you need. Use P3 for quick cooldowns. Solid S tier for me.
What do you think, Edmund?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously, I don't think you even need observers most of the time because the truck is relatively beefy and gives vision. So it's kind of your spotter, which is sometimes just environmental mutators and whatnot. Keeping your observer alive is a pain. So not even having to do that because you have a truck that has a lot more health. Obviously, it can die, but they rebuild quite quickly as well. Yeah, P3 are Karax, not Artanis, is quite good. Gonna have a pretty good time. There's not a whole ton that he struggles with here, and I think he can overcome any struggles that he may have, because double-edged is ignored by space lasers and everything else, also pretty easy. So I had him in S tier as well.
All right, Karax S tier. There we go. Our first S tier for the week, and it's not very frequent that we have an S tier for a mutation like Chaos Studios, but this is one of those weeks. Prestige recommendation, third one, right?
Yes.
All right. Let's move on. Kerrigan, where do we have him?
Kerrigan is okay against the Chaos Studios a lot of the time. Kerrigan herself, as long as you don't get a couple of the really bad ones, will do fine. Double-edged is the main pain point. Black Death, you can always just hop around with Transfuses from Queens and your Omega Worms to avoid. Things like Void Rifts, once you get to the further out Void Rifts, can be a bit of a pain. Trying to get to those far back ones. Obviously, that can be a pain for a lot of commanders, but she's one of them. Beyond that, it's not terrible. She's not great, though. But she'll do well against most of the mutators, so I had her in B tier.
B tier. What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, so the combination of the hero unit and Omega Worms provide you with, her standard solution to most mutators. Basically, is use your hero unit and pop Omega Worms all over the place. Immobilization Wave is absolutely superb on this map. Like, you basically can clear out an entire base area in one sitting with an immobilization wave. So for my money, you want to power it up fully, use P0 or P3. Personally, I like P0. Leap into the middle of the base, pop immobilization wave, everything goes boom, and then you've pretty at liberty to clear stuff up. So I think that provides her with a decent solution. The other advantage you have on this map is that once you've cleared a side, it then sort of automatically clears itself as well. So stuff like propagators against Omega Worms and stuff is actually not quite so much of a difficulty that it might present normally. So there's a few like nuanced bits and bobs here. On the sort of reverse of that coin, her army is pretty bad, basically, and that's speaking in general terms. I kind of theorized you might want to use like muters or something like that, just so you've got a bit of mobility, like they're quick. But other than that, you sort of basically pop in, clear stuff, and then go home again. But yeah, the reality is she's not without her weaknesses. But if you're able to effectively utilize her hero unit, she's pretty strong. I had her A to B because I think the hero unit is very strong, but I can completely see why she would be B tier rather than A tier.
All right, both of you agree on B tier. Let's put Kerrigan in B tier. She was in A tier last time this came around, and I actually like the argument. She's basically immobilization wave and friends. Not even Kerrigan and friends. She is immobilization wave and friends, because her entire thing is hopping to the middle of the base, drop immobilization wave, and that's all the work. She can die right there from double-edged. She'll be back in a minute, and then just be ready to fight again. But anyway, B is not bad. B is still fine. Let's... Oh wait, prestige. No prestige or third prestige? Is that what you said?
I think for a little bit more mobility on the hero unit itself, I think personally P0 is slightly better than P3 on this map.
All right, no prestige. Let's move on. Nova, where do we have him?
So Nova has classic Nova problems in the fact that her army is incredibly expensive and you don't want to lose it. So when you encounter mutators that are specifically designed to make you lose units, she encounters immediate problems. Having said that, P3 gives her offensive options under most circumstances, and the fact that you can then just resurrect Nova for money, sort of P3 pay to play, does help. For my money, you want to put all of your mastery points into the nuke cooldown, as opposed to having the cheap Griffin airstrike, because then you basically play her like Kerrigan, exactly like we've just discussed with Kerrigan. But she does have sort of Alarak style problems in the sense there are things that are going to cause her basically immediate discomfort. The reality to it is, even if you've got your army defending at home, double-edged is still going to cause absolute mayhem when your tanks and liberators are fending off attack waves. C tier.
C tier. What do you think, Edwin Home?
I think, like with double edged, the defense at home then just becomes spider mines and raven turrets instead of liberator tank, and that'll still hold against most things, or airstrike. Marines as well are a good little thing you can throw in there against double edge as well if you have the money, or airstrike. I do think P3 is going to be pretty good here. I think she's better than Kerrigan at a lot of mutators. There's a couple that she's significantly worse than. Specifically like Void Rifts. Nova can get to the Void Rifts, but she walks in slow motion, so getting to them takes forever. Things like that are a big pain. I think for just being able to walk right past literally everything and clear all the bases, like she's going to have a very easy, low effort time with the actual clearing of the bases. It's just the like staying alive at home, depending on what mutators you get. So I think she's not a lot better, but a little better at like most things and a lot worse at a couple things. So I actually had her in B tier, probably more towards the bottom, where Kerrigan's a little more towards the top.
What do you think, Joni?
I'm super happy with that. Yeah, I totally see it. I had sort of forgotten in my head that actually, because you're only going to roll a double-edged, even if you do get it for 4.5 minutes and the F spider mines, etc. She does have mechanisms still. Yeah, I'm super happy with that. I think very close to Kerrigan in reality, in terms of her mutator resilience. Happy with that.
Okay, so Nova goes into B tier. Let's move on. Rainer, where do we have him? Oh wait, Prestige, third Prestige. Stet Boy, where do we have him?
So is it me or is it you? Sorry.
Stetmann is as standard, very good. Like P2 Super Gary will deal with 90% of your problems. As previously mentioned, one of the advantages with this map is that because it almost clears itself as you go, as you complete the objectives. So even for stuff like propagators, if you are in any way, shape, or form sort of cognizant that they may be a thing, actually clearing this map as you go is not very difficult, and it's not particularly time consuming either. So with propagators basically being Stetmann's like biggest problem if you're not playing P1, he does have that resilience against propagators with this map specifically. Other than that, you basically play pretty normally. He's got really, really good like versatility in his comps. He's also one of those commanders where, because you expect to naturally lose some units, get the refunds from them, etc., like rebuilding your army to a certain extent in order to support Gary and make pushing a bit stronger is actually not as problematic with Stetmann as with other commanders. You're going to encounter certain things that slow you down. He's still prone to some of the environmental mutators, which from my point of view is why I didn't have him in S tier. I don't think that he is quite as free on this map as Karax can be. So I had him pretty solidly near the top of A tier.
What do you think, Edwin Helm?
Yeah, I think Johnny said something on a previous commander about, like it feels like there's always at least one environmental mutator, and it's very true that it's usually like one or two of the mutators are like environmental related because there's a lot of them. And so the ability for stat zones to mostly get rid of having to deal with like units dying from those, obviously nukes, stat zone's not going to save you, but most other environmental mutators being able to just shut that down for you and your ally is super great. But there are things like propagators and void rifts and things like that can be a pain. So yeah, not quite S, but definitely a pretty strong A tier.
All right. Both of you agree with A? Let's put Stet Boy in A. Prestige twice second one, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Stukov, where do we have him?
Stukov is very good against almost everything. There's a couple problems. That's
literally
transmutation. First and foremost is the big one. I think, to be fair with transmutation, if you manage to get, like, if it happens in the latter stages of the game, it might still be okay because you can just weather the storm with infinity Marines slowly wearing down the endless hybrid behemoths coming towards your base, but until the 4.5 minutes goes up. So there's that. But if you get it in the early game, it's going to be really tough. And outside of that, it's not too bad. Void Rift's a little annoying as well. So with that, I had him in B tier.
B tier. What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, very, very, very similar views. Basically, I think the one thing that I would sort of comment is that exactly like ET mentioned with sort of Stetmann, those environmentals can like wreck a Stukov comp completely. Like getting Blizzard or something like that. Particularly on this map, if you end up having to clear into the direction that the Blizzards are traveling in, like your entire comp can just get completely ruined. So I think that although he can be very strong, he can be very resistant. He can also face some problems that kind of actively can stop him in his tracks. It's like on the cusp of B to C, just because I think he can be, unlike almost any other commander, where different to most other commanders. So I suppose, yeah, in partnership with an ally who's going to do anything at all, maybe B tier rather than C. I'm happy to have him in B tier. Yeah, that's fine.
All right, both of you have Stukov in B tier. Let's put Stukov in B tier. Prestige-wise, third one. Let's move on. Swann, where do we have him?
So Swann is not as good as not as good as you want him to be on this map. Like with Swann as sort of effectively Terran Karax, one would hope that he would be sort of nearly as good. But he really is not this week. His ability to stay alive is great, is undeniable, but he is not resistant at all to pushing under a significant variety of different mutator permutations. I suspect that you will want to play P1 possibly with him on this, because although you don't have your top bars, floating factories, putting buildings out there, using the slow laser drill does give him some pushing power, which is more mutator resistant. Similarly, like Wraiths, I think probably offer him his best offensive permutation, but they are going to be absolutely stopped dead in their tracks by the likes of Double Edged, etc. So yeah, I think Swann is sort of weaker than one might want him to be. I actually had him sort of C to D tier this week.
C to D. What do you think, Edwin?
Yeah, it's unfortunate you can't unresearch the Wraith's like triple damage upgrade when there's double edged, and then re-research it again when it goes away. That would help a lot. You can do P1 things against double edged. Just mass free repair your turret or your laser drill. Obviously, you can do that with any others, but you don't have the splash damage as much. So I think the laser drill alone does do pretty well for that, and then you do have excellent base defense for pretty much everything. Missile command, it's a little more painful than like Karax's or Rainer's, but he can still get it done. So he does pretty well against all of that. I don't think he's quite as bad as D tier. I had him in C.
C tier. Okay, so both of you are okay with C tier? I guess that's where he will end up alongside Alarak. C tier. Let's move on. Tychus, where do we have him?
Tychus would be S, but for a couple small problems, like double-edged is a pain, and mainly double-edged is a pain. Black Death is a pain, because you want to be on P2 for 90% of this, but then there's the 10% that really throws a wrench in all of that. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically all there is to say about it. A tier.
All right, what do you think, Joni?
Yeah, exactly the same. Big red button solves a lot of problems, but not all of them. Generally pretty mutator resistant. I had him, play P2 probably. And yeah, I had him in A tier as well.
All right, unanimous A tier. Let's move on. Vorazun, where do we have him?
So P3, obviously, she's only got 1 prestige. Time stop is extremely useful because it gives you not only the time stop effect, but also free pushing power in terms of free units as well. You know, as per standard Vorazun, any combination of like Black Death and something else is going to cause her massive problems. You know, on this set of mutators as such, the ability to put like a free nexus down somewhere simply doesn't exist. You're going to lose it. So yeah, Black Death is a major problem for her, like even more so than normal. But you know, she does have significant ability to clear the bases. I think she just has Vorazun problems as normal, basically. So yeah, I sort of had her. She's not as bad as some, but she's also not going to be easy. But time stop's really good. Less good than an immobilization wave. So I had her in C to D tier.
C to D tier. Okay. What do you think, Edwin Home?
Yeah, it's a laborious time for Vorazun today, as Black
Laborious
Death
time.
really sucks. I guess maybe there's an argument with Black Death to go what is it, P1, where you get full healed on emergency recall, so Black Death doesn't kill your units. Big brain. I think is that P1? Yeah, I think that's
Second.
P1.
I think it's second
But
one.
anyways,
The second one.
is
The
it? I thought
second one,
second
yeah.
one was Withering Siphon.
So you have to.
Anyway,
you can make yourself. You can render yourself resistant to COVID,
Yeah.
but like terrible against everything
Completely
else.
useless against
awesome,
everything.
everything else. But yeah, so you know, there's that option. But yeah, beyond that, I mean, it's just life sucks, and when you're Vorazun at least. So yeah, I had her in D tier.
D tier. Okay, not F tier at least, or not even E tier. Let's put Vorazun in D tier. Oh wait, no prestige. No prestige. Let's move on. Zagara, where do we have him?
Zagara has the benefit of a lot of free units and cheap units. I think you could go P1 or P3 here. Obviously, having Zagara is quite a help against a lot of things like environmental mutators. She doesn't care nearly as much as your main army. But then you do sacrifice your main army being strong in general. I would probably go P3 myself because you do want the half a Brutalisk for Void Rifts and things like that. I think she'll do actually pretty well this week. And the main problems are economic mutators and things like propagators can be a bit of a pain, though they're not too bad. It's mainly a bit of a pain because of your ally. You should be able to deal with them with Banelings, hopefully. I had her in B tier.
I was about to say, of all the things you can name as a problem for Zagara, poops? Really? Anyway, what do you think, Joni?
Mainly the poop trains, I feel like your ally is going to cause.
Not even. What do you think, Joni?
But yeah, the Banelings should do well enough.
So Zagara was the only commander that I had, and I kind of appreciate this is going against the spirit of contributing to a tier list. But I had a massive spread on her this week because she is so luck dependent, and she is probably dependent on what prestige you pick. She is probably has the biggest swing of like being amazing or terrible. Like P1 clears incredibly quickly. Like it really does rip through this map. So if you gamble and you get lucky, and you know the mutators are in your favor, you can get yourself so ahead of the timer on this map that you do have the ability to literally sit in your base and wait out mutators. Having said that, P3 then, exactly like ET said, P3 gives you like significantly more versatility to deal with a broader range of mutators. But as soon as you pick your prestige, you lose the ability to like clear very quickly and effectively. So that's kind of why in my head I had this like massive swing for her. Yeah, I mean, having said all of that, long story short, that's still basically me just flip flopping around. I in my notes I had her like B to D tier because there are certain mutators that are just going to completely stop her in her tracks. A lot of them being environmental. If you're playing P1, you know, yeah, I'm
I
happy enough with B tier. I'm also could see her in C tier.
Did you say B tier, Edna?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Uh, fair enough. That is large spread indeed. But B tier's where we have him. Let's move on. Zeratul, where do you have him?
Yeah, so this is a commander where there is less fence sitting involved. Cannons are very good. That is about it. They're very mutator resistant on the whole. Zeratul has the advantage of obviously having the commander as well. He's got really good free options. Also, in terms of his cooldowns, the demote dude is basically the equivalent of a small like immobilization wave, small nuke, in the sense that it effectively negates the challenge in clearing out a base. Chuck that in with Telbrus Legion as well, you're going to be fine. P2 for the ramp. If you do have to bide some time waiting out some mutators that are not quite so friendly to you pushing out, then you just collect artifacts and build up strength as you go. So I had Zeratul. I had him S to A tier this week because I couldn't think of a mutator that was going to kind of stop him dead in his tracks that you couldn't just outweight at home, basically.
What do you think at home?
Yeah, I had Zeratul from S to F tier. No, I'm just joking. I- Cannons are very good. The legions are very good. Zeratul himself is very good in 90% of situations. There's some stuff that's like, oh, a speed bump, but there's not a wall, So I think he's going to do quite well. I think he's a head and shoulders above everyone in A tier. I do think he's a little worse than Karax, but I think he's still in S.
All right, our second S tier. Zeratul. Is there a double S this week?
No.
All right, that makes sense. Who is top of S?
Karax, I think, probably without a doubt.
All right, and then Zeratul. Who is top of A?
I'd say
I'm
probably Arcturus.
got.
Earth Splitters at home.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm inclined to say Manx as well. Yeah.
All right, then
I personally think Dehaka is pretty solid. Like him and Abathur compared to Stetmann and Tychus. Like Stetmann and Tychus have to push out on the map with units of some sort. Having said that, I mean, yeah, Tychus is extremely mutator resistant, barring a couple, isn't he?
Tychus is better in 9 out of 10 situations, but I think you want the better variance control of Dehaka. Although Dehaka does have missile command. If you got missile command,
I think we might be overrating missile command on a mutation where it only can be active for like 4 minutes.
Well, what I'm saying,
4.5 minutes of missile command is not a huge amount.
Tychus has like 2 mutators that give him trouble, and Dehaka has like 1 mutator that gives him a lot of trouble as well. Is all I'm saying. Like it's not like he's doesn't have any of the massive walls like Tychus has.
I'm inclined to agree with you. I think I'd say Arcturus, Dehaka, Tychus, and then probably Abathur Stetmann, I think.
Yeah, that's fair.
Dehaka, Tychus, Abathur, Stetboy?
Yep.
All right. Kind of a shame because Stetboy is basically the only one of these who can actually deal with, quote unquote, deal with polarity by just shoving so many units at the problem that it can't even get through. But it's fair. It's like one mutator that he does really well in, that nobody else really does well in. Who's top of B? AKA who is the blondest?
It is a game this week, isn't it? I think Kerrigan is significantly blonder this week.
What do you think at the home?
Yeah, that's fine. I think Kerrigan, then Nova, then probably Zagara, then Stukov.
Stukov is indeed the least blonde of these guys. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Who's top of C tier?
I think Swann.
Swann?
Yeah. Swann, at least you're guaranteed to stay alive at home.
Yeah, and the defensive capabilities. That and the laser drill.
Top of D?
this pile at the bottom, how do we sift these? I think probably Artanis. Archons and solar bombardment do a lot.
Yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, you can also fast expand as Artanis.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah,
Except
I think
if
maybe
there are Void Reanimators and Avengered Doodlings. Don't ask me how I know that.
Okay, so moving on without asking questions, I would say I'm just going to go with the worst. I think the worst is probably Phoenix,
All right.
and then Han and Horner. So I guess Vorazun better than Han and Horner.
All right.
I don't know.
I
Is
I,
like
I would
are
I would
strike
agree with that.
platforms worse, or are strike platforms better, or is Mass Dark Templar Time Stop better? You know, that's like the question. That's something you have to answer for yourselves, viewers. I answered it for you. It's Time Stop.
Very genius. That's why. I mean, that's why they watch the videos, right? So that they have the definitive answer that no one ever disagrees with, especially in the comments.
Especially not the last time we did this exact tier list. You know?
All right. And Rainer is down 8 here because we're very evil people. E is for evil. That's why. That's why. Yeah. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. If you have an idea for it also, please leave it in a comment. I will see you guys next time. Oh, wait. Wait. There are only 7 commanders A or above. Do we have combinations of B and below? Who would be better than Zeratul on his own?
So I think anyone in conjunction with Vorazun, particularly like Kerrigan, Vorazun and Kerrigan between them can clear an area like that without any further requirement to leave home. So I think Vorazun and Kerrigan, very powerful. Potentially like Artanis in there as well.
I was
Artanis
thinking like Swann
Yeah.
with a really good pushing commander, because Swann could take care of the base
So
defense
Kerrigan?
and helps push pretty well. Yeah, like Swann Kerrigan, maybe Swann
Swann
Zagara, something
Kerrigan,
like
yeah.
that.
I'm also looking at Stukov and Zagara. Because, like, Stukov will want to get to the late game. And how does he get to the late game? Banelings.
Yeah.
Oh, but I think that they're going to be. I think they are basically the only 2 commanders that can. If you were playing a P3 Zagara with a P3 Stukov, I can see that. I think otherwise, if you're playing P1 and P3 with Zagara and Stukov,
Yeah, definitely not.
You are basically the only 2 commanders that really come unstuck on the environmental mutators, and you could end up
That's true.
stuck
That's
at home
true.
the whole time, basically.
And Zeratul
But that's
is
why you
better
want
than that.
P3.
Yeah. All right. And that also gives you an answer against Void Rifts, which Stukov is terrible at. Yeah. Third Prestige, Zagara,
Very true.
and Stukov. All right. That's it. See you guys next time.